Hello, welcome to our second ThunderQuack Patreon Roundtable. I am your host for this evening's proceedings, Michael Cohen, those of you who don't know me. We've got two co-hosts with me this month. Matt, but maybe not the Matt that you were expecting. Not Matt the Crankster Cranky, but instead Matt Campbell, who some of you may have heard on the Rebels podcast. He was on one of our prologue episodes. Say hi to everybody, Matt.
Hello, everyone. I will try and fill Mr. Cranky's shoes as best as I can.
I don't think it'll be a problem. And we've also got Jason joining us a little bit later. He's going to pop in probably about halfway through this, and we'll talk to him about some Star Wars stuff as well. But up front, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Let's talk a little bit about ThunderQuack and what it is. For those who might not know, I don't know how you got to this video. I don't know why you're watching it if you don't know what ThunderQuack Podcast Network is. But if you head to ThunderQuack.com, you can see all of the great podcasts in the ThunderQuack Podcast Network. Like Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, the Rebels podcast, Frontlines the Clone Wars podcast, Star Wars the Saga Continues. Let's see, what else do we have? We've also got the 8-Bits of Destiny podcast, which is coming up soon. We've got Irregularly Scheduled, which will be coming probably towards the middle end of May. Hopefully, that's what I'm hoping for.
Anticipate that one.
Yeah, and we've got this is the big thing since we last did one of these roundtables. We've got Jason coming on in a little while, and that's because he will be hosting Talking Time Lords, which is a Doctor Who podcast. But in order to get Talking Time Lords on the ThunderQuack Podcast Network, we need help from you guys, our listeners/viewers, over on patreon.com/ThunderQuack. We are at $183 right now a month, which is great. It's fantastic. It helps us cover all the costs of bringing you all these great podcasts. But in order to unlock Talking Time Lords, we need to hit that $200 mark, which I don't think is asking too much. Like I said, we are at $183. We're $17 away. If 4 people contribute at the $5 level, which gets you into the ThunderQuack Patreon club over on Facebook, we will be there. We'll actually have beaten that milestone. So when we broke the $100 milestone, somebody got a prize for that. And when we break the $200 milestone, somebody might get a prize for that as well. So
that's somebody I think is sitting in this room.
Somebody might be, yeah, that's true. I no, there can be no claims of favoritism on that. I tweeted out long before you contributed that the person to knock us over $100 would get a prize. The only benefit of you getting the prize means that I don't have to ship it. I'm just going to bring it to you as a Star Wars celebration. So,
yes, it is.
Yeah, but so that's what we're aiming for right now. We're really, really close to that goal, and once we hit that goal, then we can start putting Talking Time Lords into production and get the website all set up and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. We'll probably talk a little bit more about it when Jason comes on, because I know he is looking for a co-host, so he can probably talk a little bit more effectively about that subject than I can. But also because I'm not really a doctor who I don't particularly care for it. But he is a big Doctor Who fan, and I know that a lot of our listeners, as well as some of our own podcast hosts, are big fans of the Who, so I'm sure that that's going to be a very successful podcast, and that there's going to be a lot of people waiting for that one. Let's jump into some Star Wars talk, though, Matt. How about that? So we're going to talk about Rogue One tonight. That's our main topic here. We might end up probably talking a little bit of Episode 7 because that's just kind of the way that it goes. But our main topic will be Rogue One. Here's what we know so far. We know that Gary Whitta wrote the first draft, and that in fact he is the one who titled it Rogue One, and so that his title is the one that stuck, which is really cool for him. We know that Gareth Edwards is directing, and so far we know that Felicity Jones is cast as the lead female protagonist. What that means is sort of up for debate, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. So let's talk about first. Let's give a little bit of background on those three names. So I'm just going to bring up IMDb, but we can talk a little bit about Gary Whitta first and the stuff that he's done. I can tell you he wrote Book of Eli and After Earth. I believe those are his two main writing credits that most people would know him from. And I'll say I did try and watch After Earth, and I just, man, I don't know. I couldn't get through it. I don't know about you. Have you seen After Earth, Matt?
I did. I watched it once. Not necessarily the, Star Wars-esque, but it was, I mean, like visually and kind of the idea and the premise for it was really good. I think kind of the end product was maybe lacking somewhere, but I didn't dislike the movie. And what was the other one that he did? I just completely drew a blank. But
Book of Eli.
Book of Eli, which was also really kind of good, kind of sci-fi, post-apocalyptic film.
Yeah.
Both not terrible movies. It kind of leads you to imagine kind of where this movie would go if it kind of follows that same kind of premise that both those movies have. It's funny because I just pulled up the IMDb and somebody posted a Mandalorian helmet on there on one of the pictures. I was like, oh, this is already straying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a long time, people thought that this project was going to be that Boba Fett standalone movie, right? I for one am ecstatic that it has nothing to do with Boba Fett, as far as we know. I personally don't really need to see a Boba Fett movie. That's just me. This is much more interesting to me when you throw out that title of Rogue One. But I haven't seen Book of Eli. Like I said, I've only seen the beginning of After Earth because I did end up turning it off. But here's one of the things that gets me really excited about Gary Whitta being on this project. He was one of the writers of The Walking Dead, the game, Season 1, which is the Telltale Games Walking Dead, which was, it was up for Game of the Year in a lot of major sort of gaming publications, websites, and whatnot. So it was a big deal, and to have him on that. I have that sort of pedigree that he's come from that, which is very character-centric, character-oriented. In fact, like those if we talk about his three main credits other than Rogue One, we've got the Book of Eli, very character-centric movie from what I understand, and it's on my list. Like I've been meaning to watch it, I've just not gotten around to it, especially now, right? I mean, now I kind of have to. The Walking Dead, I've played through the first episode, and it's fantastic. And After Earth, as you said, I think that the bones are there, like the structure is there for a good story. I think that the sci-fi world that was built is a bit of an interesting one. The deal with Gary Whitta having written the screenplay for After Earth is that, like, and I don't know the details. Did he write the first draft? Did he write the last draft? Like, M. Night Shyamalan is a writer-director. I mean, that's kind of how he's known. So I'm sure that a lot of what we ended up seeing on the screen was his influence, right? So at the end of the day, it feels like it was more M. Night Shyamalan's movie than Gary Whitta's. And it'd be interesting to talk to him about it and sort of get that sense of where that movie resembles his story and where it resembles somebody else's. Because for Rogue One, he was the first writer on it. So he wrote the initial draft. We will see. I'm sure that he'll talk about it after the fact. How much of his screenplay makes it on onto the big screen, right? Because I mean, we've got, let's see, for other writing credits, we've got John Knoll and Chris Weitz, who are I believe currently doing the second draft.
And a familiar name there for as well, but
Yeah.
Mr. Lucas as it says for characters. So
Yeah, so he's just, I mean, George Lucas's name will be on
everything.
basically all of the writing credits forever for all of Star Wars, right? Because somewhere down the roads it's going to be connected to one of his characters, whether a character is related to somebody or whatever, right? But yeah, I mean, so we'll have to wait and see. And John Knoll's a familiar name as well. I mean, John Knoll, worked at Lucasfilm, or has worked at Lucasfilm for a very long time, as I believe like a visual effects supervisor. Yeah, visual effects supervisor. So he's even he's credited as senior visual effects supervisor on Episode 7. So and he was very involved in all of the prequels. In fact, I owe a very big debt of gratitude to John Knoll, because John Knoll and his brother are the ones who developed Photoshop. So I wouldn't have a job if not for these guys. They revolutionized graphic design and visual editing on computers. But it's interesting that he's in there writing story. Or at least helping with the story. I don't know how much other writing credit he's got. He doesn't have any other writing credits. So John Knoll, he's got the one writing credit on Rogue One. But for anybody who's taken a look at any of the prequel trilogy DVDs and gotten into the special features of those, like the behind the scenes stuff, John Knoll can talk Star Wars with the best of them, right? So. I'm sure, I am positive that he's got a lot to say, especially if it's focused on Rogue Squadron, which at this point, of course, it is. I mean, you can't throw out the word Rogue in Star Wars without it having something to do with starfighters, right?
I kind of think that maybe, just maybe, they're trying to like throw us off the trail with that title, Not that I'm, 100% on board with that idea, but yeah. I'm sure it's exactly what we think it is, and it's about starfighters, but I was like, maybe it's about something else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it remains to be seen, right? All we have right now are like really those few names that we've mentioned tonight, and a title, and that's it. That's all we have. We have no idea what else this movie's going to be about. So this topic is wide open. Like, let's be really clear on something. This is all speculation, and I mean, we'll bring in some rumor, we'll bring in some of that stuff. That's what the roundtables are for. Normally on podcasts and on the websites, we tend to stick to fact and only really report news, but this is just a discussion. This is conversational. This is just it's just sort of us spitballing what we want to see and who we think maybe some potential characters are. Let's jump into the director, and let's talk about the director, Gareth Edwards. Now, Gareth Edwards is a name that perhaps after last summer should be a little bit more familiar to a few people, because he directed Godzilla last summer. And I loved Godzilla. I thought that it was a fantastic film. I think that a lot of people who didn't like it just didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I find that people who come out of Godzilla experiences unhappy aren't really Godzilla fans, because if you are a Godzilla fan, you like some slow movies. Because basically anything before the 90s that has the word Godzilla on it, you are in for a very cerebral, very slow science fiction story about a giant monster who will eventually fight another giant monster in the streets of downtown Tokyo, right? Like, everybody kind of knows Godzilla for those fight scenes at the ends of those movies, or sometimes at the beginning and as well as at the end. But a lot of Godzilla movies are actually about characters. They're actually about the people that are, affected. And there's usually some sort of science fiction story of uh, what are we going to do to stop Mothra? We have to do something. And another person going like, well, Godzilla will save us. Everybody knows Godzilla is the protector of Earth. Like, he'll be here and he'll beat the snot out of Mothra, right? And that was basically the plot of Gareth Edwards' Godzilla movie was there are these monsters from deep inside our own planet, and they're here to procreate and will wipe out humanity if they're allowed to do that. And Godzilla saves the day, right? And even though the humans do their best to try and stop these things, Ken Watanabe, his character is the only one who understands from the beginning of that film. Like, no, it's okay. Godzilla's gonna knock these guys out, and spoilers, Godzilla wins. Godzilla saves the day in that movie. But Godzilla aside, which I'm sure you enjoyed Godzilla as well, right, Matt?
Yeah, I did. I can totally see where people had their issues going into it, saying it was really slow paced, and a lot of people, I think, went in thinking that it was just going to be Godzilla smashing things for 2 hours. But it was really a good drama and well paced, and character development, and a lot of great acting, I thought. And I enjoyed kind of a throwback to the way, like, they didn't really show you Godzilla to begin with, and they kept you on the edge of your seat waiting to see Godzilla. And of course, when he did show up, it wasn't disappointing at all. So hopefully we kind of get that same kind of thing with this movie, like, as we both know.
Yeah,
maybe it's Godzilla in an X-wing pilot outfit. Yeah. We won't find out until much later in the movie.
So one of Gareth Edwards' other movies, that I believe he wrote and directed, is called Monsters. And Monsters, see, here's the thing. Going into Godzilla, I think I knew what to expect because I watched Monsters. Because it was sort of the elevator pitch is basically that Gareth Edwards went and he filmed this movie himself. He wrote it, he filmed it, along with some other people, I'm sure. He directed it, and he actually did the edit and the visual effects on it. And it's that doesn't happen very much these days, right? There are only a handful of directors in the world who are really talented enough to put something together from start to finish. And I say that in the sense that, because when I say talent, I'm talking about talent in the description that Bob Ross, famous PBS instructional painter, uses, which is that talent is a pursued interest, and that's all it is. You find something that you like, and then you do it. And if you do that for long enough, you get good, and you become what people call talented. And there are certain things that require natural skill in order to do, like, say, singing. I mean, if you are tone deaf or your vocal cords just don't work that way, then it's going to be harder for you to be a talented singer, let's say. But when it comes to something like a discipline like making films, or the various aspects of making films, because that's the biggest thing, is that it's a collaborative medium. It's very rare to find somebody who is that multidisciplined that they can do basically everything. I mean, one of the only other people who's been able to do it successfully and have a career in that sort of way is Robert Rodriguez, and he makes a very specific kind of movie. So I don't think Robert Rodriguez is going to be handed the keys to the Star Wars kingdom anytime soon. Not to say anything, like, that's not a slight against him. That's just not his. It's just not his kind of movie. And that's not to say that I wouldn't want to see a Robert Rodriguez directed Star Wars movie. Give him Boba Fett, and we'll get a cool movie with Boba Fett in it, right?
I was just gonna say, like, throw a bounty hunter movie his way, and we actually might get a
Give him
pretty,
Cad Bane. Oh man,
pretty epic
that would be such a good
western,
movie.
a spaghetti
But I
western-esque bounty
yeah,
hunter
I don't
movie.
know that it would fit stylistically with the rest of Star Wars. Who knows? I mean, I could be totally wrong. Maybe Robert Rodriguez has that in the chamber, right? Maybe he will be able to do that if given the chance. Let's hope that he gets the chance. But Gareth Edwards, he is this multidisciplinary filmmaker, and I think that really bodes well for this film because it means that he has an understanding of what it's going to take to bring this world to life, and he's a huge Star Wars fan. He's a really, really big Star Wars fan, which I think if we can sort of gather one thing that is a commonality between all of the directors that we've heard so far that are going to be involved with the Star Wars film. So if it's Gareth Edwards, or Ryan Johnson, Ryan, is that right?
I think so.
Looper. Yeah, I think that's it. They are all huge Star Wars fans, and in fact, like Star Wars influences are seen in many of their projects. So, like that fact kind of makes you think that's what they're going for. Like they're really trying to put people in the driver's seat that have a passion for Star Wars, that really love it and that understand it. And I think that Gareth Edwards is one of those people. So I'm really excited about his involvement with this. I think that the action's going to be fantastic because that action in Godzilla, when it finally does get going at the end of the movie, it's exactly what you want, right? Like it was perfect. So I don't know, I think giving him the keys to a couple of X-Wings and letting him fly them around in space is going to be it's going to be a fun movie, if nothing else, right?
So, real quick, step back to Monsters. Was
Yeah.
Monsters the one where they were kind of in South America, and it was kind of overrun by kind of a post-alien invasion-esque movie? Was that one?
Yeah, basically, yeah. These giant monsters have kind of attacked, and it's sort of the aftermath of that. And I believe like they're trying to get from one place to another. Like it's kind of a bit of a road movie in that sense, where like they're on a journey. It reminds me a little bit of Children of Men, where like they sort of have an impetus at the beginning. And it's been so long since I've seen it that I don't remember exactly what the plot was.
Yeah, I was trying to.
Yeah,
I was trying to put A and B together and figure out which one.
What's important to recall from that experience of watching that movie is that the tone and pacing was great, was fantastic. Like it was really suspenseful, and it just had this really sort of eerie but grounded and realistic tone, right? I think it was a fantastic film, and I think that everybody should get out there and watch it. But I don't know. I don't know if this slow pace that he had with Monsters as well as Godzilla is going to necessarily translate to Rogue One. I think that he'll probably amp it up a little bit because it is Star Wars, and you have to honor that pace, right?
Faster, more intense.
Yeah, I mean that say that, and then you jump back to Empire, which definitely has the slower pace of the original trilogy, the three original trilogy movies, and Attack of the Clones has a bit of a slow pace as well. The Phantom Menace is just boring. It's not that there's anything wrong with the pace. It's just that you're not connected to the plot line because it's ambiguous as to who is the main character and why we care, other than our obvious connections to, like, when you know who everybody is, then you can start to have I don't know, you can be invested in it, but if you don't, then it's a little bit difficult. I think that's why it misses with a lot of non-Star Wars fans. But But for the most part, I think Star Wars, and certainly Star Wars at its best, it tends to be fast paced. And I always point to Return of the Jedi as being the pinnacle of that. We talk about it a lot on the Rebels podcast, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it a lot on Clone Wars because the Clone Wars nailed it week in, week out. They would hit that pace just perfectly, where you've got characters in three separate places, all trying to do what they needed to do, and it would just sort of cut back and forth and give you that awesome sort of breakneck Star Wars pace, but still be understandable. Because there are movies with fast pace, like the Bourne movies, very fast paced movies, very hard to follow.
Yeah.
And so I watched the first Bourne movie, the Bourne Identity, and I haven't watched one since then because every time I saw a trailer, I was like, oh, there we go again. It's just more like fast cuts and not really seeing what's going on, because that's the feeling that they want to give you. If you like that, that's cool, but I mean that's not what I want. I want fast pace, but I want like clear, visible fast pace, right? I'm with Steve Glosson in the camp that you have a tripod, put the camera on the tripod, right? Like let's do away with all the everything being handheld. It's a little overused these days.
I know, it's every time Steve starts talking about that, I'm just like, yeah, I totally agree. That not to go off on a tangent, but that medium is just, I don't know, it in a world of such technology that we have with possibilities of beautiful films, shaking it around to make it blurry doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want some great examples of some good movies today, like these days that are actually managing to keep the action and the pace up, but keep things looking great. Anthony Rice just commented in the chat, Guardians of the Galaxy. I would say like that is a fantastic example of Star Wars pace, of Star Wars shooting style. I mean, James Gunn. Like, here's the thing: when James Gunn is done with Guardians of the Galaxy, give him a Star Wars standalone. Absolutely, 100%. He needs to direct a Star Wars movie at some point.
A Smugglers movie. It'd be
yeah. I mean, it would just be fantastic. I mean, I think the guy knows exactly what he's doing because there's so much of it in Guardians of the Galaxy. But Gareth Edwards, sort of getting back to him, I think because he does have all of those facets, that he's going to be able to get a good handle on the action, but the character stuff is also going to be there, and I think that is maybe the most important part of it. That flying X-wings in space, or whatever starfighters we end up with. I mean, probably X-wings. Let's be honest. That's what everybody wants to see, right? That is kind of a no-brainer. It's kind of, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I mean, when you watch Top Gun, granted that was a little revolutionary for its time, and doing those incredible stunts with they were using actual fighter jets, so maybe it's a little bit different, but really, like, getting that action in there is great. But what's the best part of Top Gun? The best part of Top Gun is the characters that get built and the arc that those characters go through, right? So you can focus on the action when it's time to focus on the action, but up until that point, let's focus on the characters and let's build some interesting characters that we want to actually see succeed, right? I think for a lot of people, that is their main problem with the prequels, is that they just don't have a connection to the characters, and they don't understand what's going on in the, or not necessarily they don't understand what's going on in the plot, but they don't care what's going on in the plot. I think for a lot of people, that's what it is. I think for us, that's definitely not the case, because we're heavily invested in Star Wars as big Star Wars fans. But for the average moviegoer, they just want to pop in, watch a Star Wars movie, and then go home. Like, they don't want to think about it afterwards. They want to experience it, and they want to say thumbs up or thumbs down, and then move on with their lives, right? We're weird. And I think that Star Wars fans forget that sometimes, that we're the odd ones that want to pick up, R2-D2 Mickey Mouse ears when they go to Disneyland, because if they don't, then what was the point of going to Disneyland, right? Most people don't think that way. And most people aren't like, worried about when we get our first look at the toys. That they'll see the toys when they see the toys and go like, "Oh, cool, new Star Wars toys. That's neat. I'm sure the kids will enjoy those." But I'm sure it's not a stretch for me to speak for both of us when I say, as soon as we get our first look at those toys, we're going to lose our minds, right? Like, that's sort of just the way that it goes. And although I've sworn off of 3 3/4 collecting, the second that they start showing off new Star Wars figures for a new movie, I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll pick up that one. Maybe just those 3. Well, I mean, like, if I'm going to get 3, I might as well get these other characters because it fills out the cast, right? I've got the whole cast now. I might as well just get this whole wave because I'm only 2 figures away. Well, I've collected the first wave, so now I have to get all of them ever. Right? And
that's exactly how it is. And that's exactly how it goes.
Yeah,
I did the same thing with Rebels.
Yeah, it's difficult. I have been so good with Rebels, and you know why? Because this is the first round of Rebels figures, and I know that we will see more Rebels figures of the same characters in a year's time, and when we do, they will be articulated, which these ones are not. And I don't want the non-articulated ones. I want the articulated ones. So I'm holding out for when the articulated ones come out, and then I'll go crazy, and then I'll have the whole crew of the Ghost and Ahsoka and Bail Organa and the Inquisitor, and I'll go whole hog for it at that point. But up until that point, I think I'll probably be good. Anthony Rice is saying in the chat that my Oswald ears don't line up with my head this month. Sorry about that. They were right behind me. Check out last month's when we talked about Marvel movies, and you'll see that my Oswald ears in the background there were like perfect. They would just like sit here every once in a while. So sorry, I know it's disappointing, but it's just the way it goes. Maybe next month
you should probably wear the R2-D2 one.
I can't get them over my headphones. That's the problem. I need yeah, it's good. Last time I think I had my Boba Fett helmet behind me, and I had put the Oswald ears on top of the Boba Fett helmet, so they like sat right there. Yeah. Cool. Let's jump from Gareth Edwards and let's talk about, and this is when we're going to start to get into our speculation territory, because so far we've just kind of talked about what we can expect from these people that have been working on Rogue One. But Felicity Jones is the first real piece of this film that we've gotten. So first off, let's jump into the IMDb and take a look at Felicity Jones and her catalog of her filmography, if you will. So we've got a whole bunch of things. She's been in so much. I'm guessing that these things are all from the BBC, because I see Doctor Who, and so I'm going to assume, because I don't know what any of these other things are, that they are from the UK.
The only thing I recognize is that The Theory of Everything, which was that Stephen Hawking's movie that just came out and won some Oscars, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so she was in an episode of Girls, apparently, which I don't watch Girls, but I know that I am supposed to. People really like that. And then the thing that I'm familiar with her from is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. She actually played a character named simply Felicia, and people who are familiar with the Spider-Man mythology know that that's probably Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat. I think that that's what they were setting that up for. That was the plan there. But
I know I geeked out at that moment. I was like,
yeah, yeah. I don't think we're gonna get there because obviously with all the Marvel stuff, Spider-Man's being rebooted. But that's okay because now Felicity Jones has Star Wars to go to, so she doesn't need to be Black Cat. But yeah, and then Theory of Everything, she was nominated for an Academy Award for that. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. That's a great thing to have under your belt when going into a Star Wars film. That said, here's my caveat to it, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate on this. Natalie Portman was very much like a sort of, I mean, she still is a very well-respected actress. And going into episode 1, it was like, oh, well, Natalie Portman, she was excellent in these things. And it was a big deal that she was going to play Queen Amidala. The biggest issue that I have with those prequels, people throw it at Hayden all the time, and I think Hayden does an excellent job because I think in episode 3 he just plays Vader. Like if you just drop it a couple octaves and put a rebreather, behind that and make it a little bit tinny, he's just Darth Vader, right? He's already there. Episode 2 maybe a little bit more on the whiny Luke side, but I think that he does a fantastic job. It's Natalie Portman for me that makes those romance scenes just flat as something that's really flat. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Her performance is in all 3 of those movies just so one note. There's nothing interesting going on there. And from such a talented actress, it's really a shame. But I didn't realize this until a little while after the first Thor movie. And when people would talk about the first Thor movie and how they didn't really like it, and I would go, I don't know, I think everything in Thor is fantastic, except for maybe Natalie Portman, who's kind of phoning it in. And then I realized, wait a second, she's been phoning it in her entire career when it comes to these heat properties. She does them because they allow her to do the other projects that she wants to do. And that's fine. That's cool. Like, do that, right? Uh-huh. Do a couple of studio movies. Do these big high-profile movies like Star Wars and like V for Vendetta and Thor, so that you can go do Garden State and Black Swan and all of the other great things that she's done. But that doesn't mean that when you're there that you can just kind of deliver dialogue, right?
Mm-hmm. Because her name does attract. Her name brings people in, but then when you get in there and you get episode 2 and you're just like, okay, so where did this go wrong? Like, this is Natalie Portman. We should be getting, like, she should be obviously the best actor probably in the films.
Yeah.
And it's just, and everyone will throw, well, Hayden Christensen weighed her down or whatever, or George Lucas's dialogue was terrible or whatever. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it seemed like she just almost didn't care.
Yeah, I think that there was just a lack of I don't know, like subtext in that character. It's like everything that she was saying was just there. I think that part of that is going to go on George Lucas's shoulders. I wouldn't say so much in his writing as in his directing, because if you really, like, let's be perfectly honest, if you go into A New Hope, Empire, and Jedi, and you look at the dialogue, there's some pretty bad dialogue in there. Not necessarily bad, but just like boring, flat dialogue. But when you have actors like Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill, who all have such fantastic chemistry with one another, and you're throwing in some heavy hitters like Peter Cushing's and oh my goodness, Alec Guinness and James Earl Jones. Like, when you throw these people in there, then it's just going to elevate it, right? Like it's
Mhm.
gonna bring it up to another level, regardless of what it is. Um, for the prequels, I've said this many times on many different podcasts and in many different conversations, private and public, that the biggest misunderstanding about the dialogue in the prequels is that the original trilogy is just a movie. They're just movies, right? Like they're just sort of standard Buck Rogers sci-fi movies, right?
Mhm.
Sci-fi fantasy space opera, right? But the prequels are Shakespeare, right? Like that's what they are. If you look at the way that that dialogue is written and the way that it's delivered by those classically trained theater actors, they're awesome. Ian McDiarmid knocks it out of the park with every single one of his lines. He's fantastic through and through in all three of those movies.
Mhm.
He's so good. Same with Ewan McGregor. Ewan McGregor is fantastic as Obi-Wan in especially Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. He doesn't get a lot to do in it in the Phantom Menace, so it's not really his fault. But
But he's still
there's just
there.
like
It's okay.
there's just like a difference in the way that that dialogue is sort of written, and there's a different flow to it. And I think that that was where both Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen, as well as some of the other actors, Samuel L. Jackson, had a little bit more trouble with it because it's not as snappy as the original trilogy. It's much more long-winded and sort of it's not monosyllabic, polysyllabic, right? Like it's a lot of exposition dialogue and that sort of thing. But with the right actors, that's fine. So getting back to Felicity Jones, we got a little far afield there. But getting back to her and what she can hopefully bring to the character, what do you want to see from Felicity Jones? Do you think that she is the main character, or do you think that she's just a character?
I think I feel like the way they want to go with Star Wars now is they want more of a strong female presence. And not just because Star Wars has always had strong female presence, but I think with the world we're in now and with the
Mm-hmm.
way Disney kind of wants to seem to market Star Wars and how we all kind of really want to see it, having the main character be a female lead, I think
Mm-hmm.
would be awesome. I mean, Rebels, my favorite characters on Rebels are Hera, who is the female pilot
Mm-hmm.
of the Ghost, and while not getting very much center focus yet, but still probably my favorite character on that show. But I
Mm-hmm.
think what they want is to kind of, the old joke was like, oh, there's only one girl in the entire Rebel Alliance, and I
Yeah.
think now we're at a point in the world where we can show these strong female characters leading, you know, squadrons of X-wings or whatever, and I think it would
Yeah.
be fantastic. And I don't know if you have read the new Princess Leia comic. I know I haven't read the Princess Leia comic yet, but I keep seeing on the covers this female in an X-wing pilot costume. I'm very curious as to who she is.
Yeah.
But like I said, I have yet to pick those up, and I don't know if you have either. But
No, I haven't because I'm waiting for the trade paperback, right? Like
mm,
that's just how I read my comics these days. I'll be reading the what's it called? The Last Padawan. I think that's the subtitle of the Kanan book
mhm,
that they're doing because my favorite character in Rebels is Kanan. But
mhm,
my wife Crystal's favorite character is Hera. She
mhm,
loves Hera. She thinks she's fantastic. So,
yeah,
and I totally agree with you. Like I think less so than wanting her to be the main character or thinking that she's going to be the main character. I from an academic standpoint, she needs to be the main character. One of these Star Wars films needs to have a female protagonist in that central role. That needs to be something that we do moving forward. It's just the way that it should be. And once we get that under our belt, we can start talking about other elements that are underrepresented in Star Wars, because it really is like it's kind of annoying that and this is coming from a white dude that really, like, that's all there is in Star Wars, right? Like, in both the prequels and the original trilogy, you've got a bunch of white guys running around doing everything, and they've got their token female sidekick and their token black sidekick, right? Like, that's kind of the way that it goes. And as Amanda has pointed out to me in private conversations, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, alien characters do not count as representative of diversity, right? So although Star Wars is a very diverse universe, a diverse galaxy of characters, and particularly when you start getting into the expanded universe, representation isn't really counted when it's a bunch of Twi'leks, right? So it is important that for me, because Star Wars films are first and foremost for kids, that there's all sorts of role models for all sorts of people, right? Really, just for everybody, and not just for little boys and little girls, but just for everybody from all walks of life, however they identify, whoever they are, whatever their beliefs are, whatever their feelings are, all of that stuff. Like, it should be all encompassing. The Star Wars galaxy is a big place. It shouldn't just be a bunch of white dudes running around calling the shots, right? And we're lucky, I think. We're lucky that characters like Princess Leia are in the Star Wars films, and that, like, both Leia and Padme, they do call the shots themselves. I mean, like, it certainly, Leia from her introduction is shown as a very strong person, and I think that other characters like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who's very often credited with being, one of the beginning of that vanguard of strong female characters. We use the quote "strong female characters" because we know how Joss Whedon feels about that. I think Princess Leia was really one of the first mainstream characters to fit that mold, and a lot of characters that have come after that. So we're talking about Buffy, I'm talking about Black Widow, I'm talking about basically everybody that's come after. They owe it to Princess Leia, and Princess Leia owes that debt to Lois Lane, who is the original spunky.
And it comes full circle.
Yeah, we'll bring it right back to Superman right behind me. For those who can't see, I'm just going to tilt this up so everybody can see my awesome Man of Steel poster back there. So what? Like, it's not to say that the characters that we have aren't great characters. Princess Leia, Padme, Hera, Sabine. I mean, Sabine less so. She hasn't really gotten to do very much yet. And even some of the expanded universe characters, like Mara Jade and Winter, and I don't know. Vergier's a really cool character. That
who are these people that you speak of?
Yeah, but none of them count anymore. So they're all nothing. They mean nothing. But yeah, I don't know. That said, that there are great characters. I haven't even mentioned Ahsoka. I mean, jeez, that's a faux pas on my part. I should have mentioned Ahsoka alongside Padme and Leia, because I think she's become as important a character.
Certainly as loved for a character who started out being
as perhaps the most reviled character in Star Wars history, aside from Jar Jar Binks. Yes.
and is now a beloved character.
It's amazing to me that her first appearance in the Clone Wars was just like people just hated that character. They just hated her. And I mean, like, I don't know. You'd have to go back and listen to early episodes of Frontlines. And maybe, Matt, you could verify because you've been listening since the beginning. I don't know. I think my initial reaction was I could do without Ahsoka, but she's here, so let's see how it goes, right? Like, I'm sure she'll grow into a character that we all love. I hope that I was that forward thinking.
I think you and I were kind of in the same boat at the time of, well, I don't necessarily see how this character is going to work, but I'm willing to give it a chance and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Probably because we both, we love this franchise and we know that it's not going to let us down.
Yeah.
So they're doing something that ultimately is for us, but at the time we were like, oh no, not this, who's this Padawan of Anakin's that we've never heard of or seen before, and it's a little girl, oh no.
Yeah. And they have obnoxious nicknames like Sniff and Sky Guy for each other. And I do remember this because I stand by this comment, this mentality. R2-D2 already has a nickname. It's R2. We just call him R2. A-R-T-O-O. R2. It's a nickname already. She then takes his nickname and adds more to it, defeating the purpose of a nickname, and calls him R2-y. And it still drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. I don't go back and I haven't watched the movie in years. The Clone Wars movie. It's a little rough around the edges. And I think Dave Filoni would be one of the first people to. Sorry.
I said, thank goodness she developed into such a great character.
Yes, yeah. So to bring that all back, yeah, she has turned into a fantastic character, and actually that brings me to our first comment from our listeners, our viewers, and this one is from Brian Bailey, and he says, "Would you like to see Felicity Jones play Ahsoka and Ben Mendelsohn play Cad Bane in Rogue One?" And then he continues, "If in fact they are going to deal, if they are in fact going with the capturing the Death Star plans just before Episode 4, / establishing of the Rogue Squadron." So here's two things to that. The second half of that, I highly doubt that it's going to have anything to do with capturing the plans to the Death Star. And my reason for that, if you're a listener of Rebels podcast, you'll know that I feel very strongly that those characters are going to be the ones that find the plans to the Death Star and get them to Princess Leia. That series is going to run for about 5 years, and at the end of that 5 years, they are going to literally hand the plans to the Death Star to Princess Leia or somebody on the Tantive 4, and that's where the series ends. It literally ends where Star Wars begins.
Yeah, I don't think that this movie is a prequel to what we're going to see in Episode 7. I think we're moving forward from Episode 7, and that we should look at the format of this kind of similar to how the Marvel movies are run, and that Rogue One will lead into Episode 8. and whether Andy said, is it going to be a franchise in of itself? Will we see Rogue One, Episode 2 or what have you? I don't know, but I feel like if the characters that are probably going to be established in Rogue One will probably play a role in Episode 8 and moving forward. So, but
yes,
I did at one point, prior to coming on here, trying to figure out what we were going to talk about, just kind of speculating what this movie could be about. The idea did cross my mind that, is it out of the realm of possibility that they're going to throw some makeup on Felicity and she is going to be the live-action version of Ahsoka? Are we going to see that?
So
I think it's a small possibility, but...
Yeah, I think that there is a very slight chance there. I would put it somewhere between 5 and 10% chance that she's going to play Ahsoka. I don't think that that's what's going to happen because I think that Ahsoka has a specific role to play in the Star Wars saga, and I think that that role. I mean, here's the thing. So this is spoilers for Rebels if you haven't finished Rebels. I don't know if we've
Shame on you.
explicitly said it, but yeah, shame on you for not having finished Rebels yet. But we're gonna get into spoiler territory, if only for the fact that Ahsoka has shown up in Rebels. She showed up in the season finale, and she will play a part in what's to come for our heroes in season 2 and beyond. It is no coincidence that Ahsoka shows up in the same episode that Darth Vader shows up. And everybody that I've talked to about this has said, about Vader showing up, has said, "Oh, I think they got there too quick." Now that Darth Vader's there, like, what are they going to do? Like, our heroes can't stand up against Vader. If they have to fight Vader, like, they're just going to do the same thing they did to General Grievous in the Clone Wars, which is make him look like an idiot, right? Because our heroes are going to constantly defeat him in order to survive, and it's just going to turn into a cartoon show. And my answer to that is Vader is there to oversee things along with Tarkin, right? Like at this point in the story, Vader is very much Tarkin's lapdog, right? And we know that because of the line that Leia says, which is that, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash, right? that Tarkin has called Vader in because he knows that, like, he's not going to be able to get these results himself. He certainly wasn't able to do it with the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor wasn't up to the task. So you're going to bring in Darth Vader because Darth Vader is going to give them proper motivation to fight these rebels, to track them down. The other aspect is that our heroes are going to be all over the galaxy in the next season. Like, we know that. We've been told already that it's not going to just be Lothal. They're going to be all over the place. And it's going to be a much bigger galaxy for them moving forward. So that says to me that, like, they're not going to have direct conflict with Vader. There is one character who is going to have direct conflict with Vader, and she showed up in the scene right before him. The reason why they're both there is because Dave Filoni has a story that he has to finish. And for anybody who did watch Clone Wars, the last time Anakin saw Ahsoka, as far as canon is concerned, was on the steps of the Jedi Temple, and when she left the Order. So if that maintains, if that remains true, that Anakin never saw her again during the Clone Wars, and that he hasn't seen her since, she may not know that Vader and Anakin are one, that they're the same person. In fact, I'm leaning towards that. I'd probably say it's about 75% sure on that one. That she has no idea that Darth Vader is Anakin. And I don't know. I was starting a list and I forget what my list was.
The things that she was gonna.
That conflict is going to have to happen. Like, that resolution between those two characters is going to have to happen. And I think, personally, that Ahsoka is going to be the first one to crack the armor, if not only metaphorically, perhaps also physically. That Vader, up until this point, is indestructible, and that no one has been able to oppose him. I think that Ahsoka will be the first one to step up and be able to stand up to Vader, whether or not she obviously can't defeat him, because we know that he's around, right? I mean, he's Darth Vader. We know his story well. But I believe that she's going to be the first one to sort of get in his head and start to bring Anakin back in. At this point in time, he's totally lost.
Mm-hmm.
that he's Darth Vader fully. There is no Anakin in there at the moment because he believes he's lost everything. He's lost Padme. He's lost his child because he thinks that there was only one. He's lost Ahsoka. He's lost Obi-Wan. He's lost the Jedi Order. He's lost the Republic. Like, it's all gone. Everything is gone, and the only thing he has left. This is the most fascinating thing about Vader as a character. The only thing he has left is his old friend Chancellor Palpatine, who's now the Emperor. So when you think about that, and then you think about Return of the Jedi, where Luke says to him, "Join, like you can. There's still hope for you. I know that there's still a part of my father in there, the good man that you once were." And Vader's like, "No, it's too late for me. I'm the Emperor's right-hand man. Like, that's who I am. It's who I've always been. There's no use in fighting it, right? Like, it's pointless." So when you put those two things together, it's like that's really, like, that's all he has, right? So when he sees Ahsoka again for the first time, it's going to be a big deal for Anakin inside of Darth Vader, right? So
well,
I think
the first part of him just that rock breaking,
yeah,
that outer shell just coming apart.
And then the next piece is when he discovers that Luke Skywalker is the one who destroyed the Death Star, and puts it together and goes, there's only one person who could have possibly destroyed the Death Star. This is a great thing as well, because it's only Anakin's ego that would think, like, Skywalker, because George Lucas has said Skywalker is just a last name. It doesn't hold any extra significance. Luke didn't need to change his last name because you opened up the Galactic Phone Book. There's more than one Skywalker. It's not like Anakin would have been like, oh, that's the only other one. But the ego of him to go like, Luke Skywalker, bet you anything, that's my son, right? Like,
his piloting skills are really good.
Yeah, to just immediately jump to that. I mean, like, there's the connection to Obi-Wan and everything, and that the Force is with him and all that. But I think that it takes an Anakin ego to get that leap. But I think that all of this, the point of bringing up all of that stuff about Rebels is to say that Ahsoka has a very clear story point that I think that she's meant to fulfill.
In Rebels and not in a standalone.
Yeah, and I think to be perfectly honest, it's a disservice to Dave Filoni to give that character and that character's arc to somebody else, to let that character finish their story in somebody else's hands. I think that he created that character with George, and it's his job to see that character through to their end. And I think that end is going to be in Rebels at some point. So I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be way off, but I'm not usually. I don't know. Maybe that's my own arrogance. A little bit that I have in common with Anakin, but I think the record will show with both Clone Wars, Rebels, and I said both, but now I'm going to give 3, and Arrow, that I'm right a lot of the time when it comes to this stuff. I think I know my storytelling.
You are pretty clever. So to continue on this speculative train of who she is, do we want to speculate as to who she more likely is? Do we want to point that she is the maybe the daughter of Han and Leia, or is it something more obscure in that we've heard in rumors that there's possibly a descendant of Obi-Wan Kenobi running around, and that this could be that, or even with the title of Rogue Squadron or Rogue One, is she possibly a daughter of, like, Wedge Antilles or something?
Yeah. Well, we'll get back to that, because right now we have to introduce our third host for this evening's proceedings, and that is the illustrious Jason Hunt of the Wampus Lair and soon to be Talking Time Lords. Say hi, Jason.
Woo! Hey, how's it going?
It's good.
I'm here.
You made
I made it from work, and I've got a plate of food in front of me. So excuse me if you watch me stuff my face while I talk, but I'm hungry and I haven't eaten since lunch. So
that's fair. That's perfectly fair. So we're at the point in our conversation where we are now speculating about who Felicity Jones could possibly be playing. We've just talked the Ahsoka angle to death, so you don't need to worry about that. We've ruled it out. I think that you can say it's empirical truth that Felicity Jones will not be playing Ahsoka Tano in Rogue One. Also, look, here's the thing. Everything else that I said for the story reasons why Ahsoka isn't going to be in Rogue One because she's going to finish her story in Rebels. It doesn't make any sense. She's not a pilot. Like, that's not her thing. She's a Jedi, former Jedi, whatever, lost Jedi, let's call her. She has her own thing, and it's not starfighter pilot. Yeah, she was a decent pilot. She was maybe even a good pilot. But I am hoping against all hope that the Force has nothing to do with Rogue One, in the sense that, like, there are no Jedi. This isn't the expanded universe. Every third character isn't a potential Jedi. The Jedi are supposed to be, like, few and far between throughout the galaxy. So building a new Jedi Order is going to be a difficult thing to do, if that's even what Luke Skywalker has tried to do in Episode 7. So if we are maintaining the idea that this is in the same era as Matt has said, but sort of between 7 and 8, which I agree. I think that the way that this is structured is the antithesis, but also the exact same, and then merged together as what they've done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they did standalone individual movies. So they started with Iron Man and the Hulk, and then they eventually started bringing everybody together for the Avengers. I am hoping, and I think that what we're going to get here is 7, 8, 9 are Avengers 1, 2, and 3. But in between, we're going to get those individual movies. So Rogue One is our first Iron Man, right? And so the rules are going to be a little bit different, hopefully. And the Force is not going to play as big of a role, because if I want to see, if it ends up being what I think most of us want it to be, which is a Rogue Squadron movie, basically taking one of those Rogue Squadron books or the Rogue Squadron video games and turning it into the plot of a film, then the Force is really secondary to that, because this is about pilots and flying X-Wings. And yeah, one of them might have a little bit of an affinity for the Force, and maybe that's how they're so good, but no one ever talks about Wedge being Force sensitive. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but it doesn't matter. He's Wedge Antilles, and he's one of the greatest starfighter pilots in the galaxy, and that's all you need to know, right? Like, Luke is a Jedi. He can be a Jedi. So yeah, I don't know. Like let's leave Ahsoka out of it. Let's leave Jedi out of it, and let's just look at some regular people. The story of the Jedi is better served in 7, 8, 9 for now, and then we'll get to more Jedi stuff later on. But yeah, I'm really hoping that it's just straight up regular pilots who just happen to be the greatest pilots in the galaxy.
So are you saying that she's a Corellian? Because don't we know all the pilots come from Corellia?
No.
Yeah, I mean, well, because she's human. Only because she's human. Because I don't think that they're going to put makeup on Felicity Jones, because I think Felicity Jones is fine just the way that she is. So let's just, we're good with that. We don't need to hide that behind blue face paint. Or orange face paint if she's Ahsoka. But
besides, if you were going to have Ahsoka, why not just get Ashley Eckstein to come and play her on screen too? I mean, Ashley could do that. She cosplayed as her one time. She had a big photo shoot with that one time, so she looked really good in it. So I was like, okay, if we needed a live action Ahsoka, we've already got one. And Felicity Jones, no, that's not.
No, I don't. So I mean, like, I'm really hoping. I hope that she is a legacy character. I hope that she does have a connection to somebody that we know and love. I think the idea that she is an Antilles, that she's somehow related to Wedge, would be great. I think I think like having her be a unique character is the most important part. I think that having these new standalones be their own thing and sort of standing is just really honestly standing on their own 2 feet, and being their own movies is a really important thing moving forward, because we're going to get 7, 8, and 9, and by the time we get to the end of 9, that story should be done, so that our familiar characters should be gone, and we should be used to the idea that Star Wars is a wider galaxy than just 3 characters, right? Because that's really what everybody's focused on. Everybody's really, really focused on Han, Luke, and Leia. Even going into Star Wars Celebration, everybody's really focused on that core cast and what that means. And I think if anything is indicated by the promotional material so far, it's that really, like, if that's what you're going to Episode 7 for, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah.
Because that movie is going to be about those 3 new characters. Mm-hmm. And that's John Boyega's character, Finn, Daisy Ridley's character, Rey, and Oscar Isaac's character, Poe Dameron, right? Like,
I feel like
are...
Go ahead,
sorry?
No, I was just going to say I feel like John Boyega is going to be our lead in the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm starting to lean more towards Oscar Isaacs being sort of the standout character, but you might be right. I think you might be, because it sounds, if the rumors are to be believed, then it sounds like it sort of revolves around his story. But I don't know. I think that there'll be. I think that what we're going to get is 2 stories that start and then eventually come together, and that it'll be very much in the same way that Luke and Leia eventually find themselves in the same place, and Han is just sort of brought along for the ride. Mm-hmm. And if you look at those characters, I think you can look at Poe and Finn being in different places and eventually coming together with whatever that new Rebel Alliance is, and that Rey is just going to be brought along for the ride with Finn. That's where that story is going to go, and it's going to mirror A New Hope a lot in that way. But so all that to say, to get back to Felicity Jones and Rogue One, it's been a night of tangents, Jason. Hey, we've been all over the place.
I'm shocked. I'm utterly shocked.
I think that Felicity Jones's character is going to be, she will be a unique character. I don't think that she'll be based on anybody. I don't think that she will be I don't know, sort of like a reimagining of a character from the expanded universe. I think she's going to be a wholly unique character, and I'm ready for that. I'm excited for that. Personally, I don't care that we got rid of the expanded universe. I think the expanded universe, for all of the things that it did well, like if you count every one thing that it did well, there were at least 3 terrible things that it did. So, you know, I'm glad to see the expanded universe go. I'm really disappointed that our current, I guess we're calling it continuity, but our current expanded universe, being the new books and that sort of thing, really aren't doing any better. That the comics and these books are about the same as what they were before. All they did was wipe off the whiteboard so that they could write more stuff. Right? Like, it wasn't like, well, let's wipe off the whiteboard, remove the whiteboard, and then put up some actual posters. It was like, no, we're just going to keep writing on this whiteboard and filling it with as many obnoxious characters as we can that are...
They just started over doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But see, we're on another tangent. So what I would like to see, I would honestly like to see this character basically be, and this is what I'd also like to see from the plot, is I basically want her to be Maverick from Top Gun. I mean, like, I want this movie to be Top Gun in space. I love Top Gun. I love Tom Cruise. I love the Republic. I knew that would get Jason.
You get me. I will lay down. Never mind. Continue.
But that's what I want to see from this. I don't necessarily want it to be a training school, but I want that same sort of dynamic of I want her to be sort of the new recruit, or sort of like the fresh face that's being brought into this new conflict, because I do think that this is going to center around whatever the new conflict is. I think that since the end of Return of the Jedi, we're going to get these aftermath stories. The aftermath stories are going to sort of tell this bit of story of like how basically like they defeated the Emperor, but they never defeated the Empire. That the Empire sort of continued on in its own way as this other entity, and that the war died down, but the injustice didn't go anywhere. Right? That like even though they may have defeated the dark side, they haven't defeated evil. Right? Like Luke brings balance to the Force, but it's going to take a longer amount of time than the 6 to 10 years that the original trilogy takes place in to actually fix a galaxy. Right? I mean, it took Palpatine a very long time to put a plan into place to overthrow it. So undoing all of the work that he did is going to take more time than that. So I think what we're going to see is a galaxy that has not been in direct conflict for a long time, that in that 30 years, probably 20 years of that has been what we could call peacetime, and that there is the New Republic on one side of the galaxy and the remnant of the Empire on the other side of the galaxy, and they're just staying in their own sandboxes. But whatever this new conflict is, whatever this new dark side force is, this awakening, it's going to bring those two sides back into conflict. And when it does, that means, who are you going to call? If you were on Earth in New York, it would be the Ghostbusters. But because we're in space and it's Star Wars, it's going to be Rogue Squadron. So I hope that they've given Dennis Lawson a call. I hope that he's going to basically play I think it's is it Tom Skagit? Skagit. I'm bringing up Top Gun so that I can get all of this right. Tom Skerritt. That's the name. That's the name I'm looking for. Tom Skerritt. Viper. That role of like the mentor who's going to bring together this ragtag group and mold them into the new Rogue Squadron, and that our story is about Maverick, basically the hotshot that stands out, but that's a little too good for their own good, right? That needs to sort of learn leadership and learn how to be Rogue One, the leader of Rogue Squadron, right?
I hate to burst your bubble just a little bit, but early on, Dennis Lawson already said that he has turned down any role for coming back as Wedge Antilles.
Oh, has he? Okay.
Yes, but
we could always recast.
Yes, enough time has passed. We can always recast. So I'm not ruling out Wedge Antilles. Wedge should and hopefully will be in this movie because he should. Yeah. And he's awesome, honestly, but it won't be Dennis Lawson.
Yeah, I think I really hope that the original 4 members of Rogue Squadron all sort of make appearances or at least get mentions in Rogue One. That like that legacy is still sort of there, and that they're still the sort of the heroes of the rebellion, right? Because that sort of and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never read any of the actual Rogue Squadron books, but as I understand it, the original members of Rogue Squadron are the 4 pilots that made it out of the Battle of Yavin, right? It's Luke, Wedge, because at the end of A New Hope, you see 4 ships flying away from the Death Star. You see the Falcon, you see Wedge's X-Wing, you see Luke's X-Wing, and you see a Y-Wing. But Y-Wings can have 2 people in them because there's a gunner position in a Y-Wing. So like it's those 4 pilots. It's Luke, Wedge, and then it's Hobby, and I can never remember the 4th one.
Jansen.
Jansen.
Wedge
Yeah.
Jansen.
They're the original
Jansen.
Rogue Squadron. Yeah.
And
that, like they made it out, and that's how they became Rogue Squadron. Like that's where they earned that name, and that like that squadron was formed as like the elite rebel squadron. And like I think that because if it does take place between episode 7 and 8 in that time period, they there will be an impetus to bring together a new Rogue Squadron. There will be a reason, right? It's a new generation, and I would think that the name Rogue Squadron, the title of Rogue Squadron, sort of died, not necessarily because those characters died, but died with those original four. Like as they sort of went their separate ways or followed different paths, that Rogue Squadron was no more. Because Luke was the first one, right? Because right in Empire, he gets in his X-wing and he takes off, and he's never really part of Rogue Squadron again. That was sort of the first one, and then sort of everybody kind of went their separate ways, and now because there's a new threat, they need to bring together a new Rogue Squadron, and that's what the movie is about. I really hope that that's what the movie is about, and I hope that Felicity Jones is the title character. She's the eponymous character Rogue One.
Well,
I thought you were going to burst my bubble and tell me that Rogue One's not the leader of Rogue Squadron, because you'd be correct in saying that, Jason.
It's Rogue Leader.
It is Rogue Leader, but just because it was Rogue Leader before doesn't mean that it needs to be Rogue Leader this time.
Right. I mean, I do think that Felicity Jones will be the title character. If she's the only one that they've announced for this movie so far, I mean, usually they announce the star first. That's generally the way this goes, and I know that they're still doing casting and stuff, but I'm excited because we're going to find out a whole bunch more about this in just a couple weeks in Anaheim. So
well, I think they've actually already said that there's not going to be a lot of there's not a lot of news. And it's funny because there's a Tom Cruise connection in this, and we've been talking about Tom Cruise already tonight. They're not going to do a lot of promotion of Rogue One or a lot of talking about Rogue One until after this summer, because Mission Impossible 5 Rogue Nation is coming out, and they don't want confusion around those two names being so similar. I think that's ridiculous, because I think when you say Rogue One at this point, you have to be living under a rock or really not care about Star Wars in order to not know that, like, oh yeah, that's that new Star Wars movie, right? Is that the one coming out this year? It's like, no, that's not the one coming out this year. Read a newspaper, please.
So is it going to be Star Wars Rogue One or just Rogue One?
We don't know that yet, right? All we know so far is that it will be titled Rogue One. But I would think that because when we got the title for The Force Awakens, we got the title Star Wars The Force Awakens, right? Mm-hmm. And it's when it's referred to by Lucasfilm, it's Star Wars The Force Awakens. And then in this press release, it was the title is Rogue One. That they might be getting away from calling every single one of these movies Star Wars : whatever. If only for the fact that they will want to put subtitles on some of these other movies further from the actual title. And that's always, it's been the bane of Star Wars creative's existence since The Empire Strikes Back, is Star Wars Dark Forces 2. What do you do? What do you call it? It's Star Wars Dark Forces 2. And then it's got a subtitle to it, I'm sure, right? Or like Jedi Academy. Like, so it's always like, you want to make a Star Wars The Clone Wars video game that has a specific title. Star Wars, The Clone Wars, I don't know, Churches,
Republic Forces.
Right? Yeah. Like, you at some point you're like, okay, let's replace one of those colons with a hyphen, I guess. Does that work? So I think that Lucasfilm and Disney want to get away from that, and maybe just refer to them by their titles, because the fact that they are Star Wars movies will sort of be enough.
Can I just say real quick how happy I am that the first standalone movie is not a Boba Fett or Han Solo movie?
Or a Darth Vader movie.
Or, can I just say how happy I am that is not the case? Because I'm honestly, I'm not interested in a Boba Fett movie, and I'm probably one of like 5 people in the entire country that would say that.
Yeah.
And Han Solo, I don't want to do that because you're going to have to recast Han Solo, and Harrison Ford is still playing the guy, so why do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that this is what we're getting, and it's not going to be,
Yeah.
you know, Boba Fett running around with his jetpack and shooting things and all that fun stuff. So
Well, I feel like if going back to the titles, that if they're gonna follow the footsteps of Marvel and what Marvel's doing, then they might drop the Star Wars titles because it's not Avengers, Captain America, Winter Soldier. It's just Captain America, Winter Soldier. So we might actually be going in that direction of it just being Rogue One, and then whatever standalone movie 2 is and standalone movie 3 is.
do you think we could get Rogue One, The Empire's Revenge down the road, something like that,
Sure, I know it was brought up in the chat a little bit ago. Will there be sequels to these standalones? And I don't. That's an interesting question. I don't know.
I think if we're talking about this in the sense that they are following the format that they've forged with Marvel, then yes, I think that there can be sequels to this. So I think because this first one's called Rogue One, I mean. The next one could be called Rogue Squadron, the next one could be called Rogue something, right? And that Rogue becomes the thing that ties them together. Because this one is I think that title holds a lot of significance, and I think that we can actually glean a lot from it. And I think the fact that they've only given us that title is because there's a lot to chew on there. Rogue, obviously, I mean, we've been talking about it all night. It comes with a huge amount of significance in the Star Wars universe. It means something specific to people. It means X-Wings. It means starfighters. It means a lot. Especially to those fans, and I mean, like, I consider myself a very big Rogue Squadron fan, but I didn't read the books. I just played the video games, right? I loved the video games, which pulled from some of the novels and sort of some of the other expanded universe stuff. But really, there are these other fans out there that are even bigger Rogue Squadron fans than that are really invested in the characters that were the Rogue Squadron, and not even the ones that were really in the movies, but the ones that became Rogue Squadron in those novels and in the larger expanded universe during the New Jedi Order and all that sort of thing. So I think they know that they're aware that by putting Rogue in the title, and let's get down to it. Gary Whitta is the one who put Rogue in the title. He titled it Rogue One, and they just kept the title. So Gary Whitta is a huge Star Wars fan, and he knows exactly what he's doing when he puts Rogue in the title.
Yes.
The other aspect of that title is one. And one being one. I mean, I don't think that we really need to dive too deep in order to figure out what that significance could be, right? And I think because we have The Force Awakens and Rogue One. Those are our first two Star Wars movies. Both of them are beginnings.
Yes.
Right? Like, I mean, I think it just kind of it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put these things together. That there is a logic to why they make these decisions. It's not just, put a couple of titles up on the wall and we'll throw darts, and whichever one gets the most darts, that's the one we're going with. Like, it's a title is a significant thing, and Star Wars titles in particular, I think, have been very significant, and love them or hate them depending on the title. They all have a really important meaning. So, and they've all actually given us very big hints as to what the movies ended up being about. I mean, people who were surprised by the end of The Empire Strikes Back, they really should have figured it out. The rebels blew up their Death Star in the first movie. When they strike back, they're gonna win, right? Like, it's the Empire. Yeah. So, like, the end of Empire Strikes Back shouldn't have been that big of a surprise. And then Return of the Jedi. I mean, I think that we all should have seen that as Anakin returning, right? I mean, that's sort of the double meaning there, is that Luke, in confronting Vader, becomes a Jedi, but it's Return of the Jedi plural, as well as Return of the Jedi singular, right? Like there's an important deep meaning in that title as well. And eventually, Star Wars Episode 4 would be given the title of A New Hope, and that, again, like The Force Awakens and Rogue One, very self-explanatory in my opinion. Like it sort of just lays it all out on Front Street. It's, the one that is the best title that really, the more you think about it, the better it gets, is The Phantom Menace.
Oh yeah.
Or like for all of that movie's failings, the title is really the thing. First of all, The Phantom Menace just has such a great ring to it, and people who make fun of it, they're just looking for things to make fun of. They're just being cynics and whatnot. But really, like when you break it down and you start to think about it, it's like, well, who is the Phantom Menace? Is it Sidious? Of course, it's Sidious. It's Palpatine. Yes. But that's on the surface. What's the real Phantom Menace? Because when we get into the Jedi and how they're sort of falling apart, I think it's really important that when you watch Episode 1, you can take a look at the Jedi. They are really portrayed as bad guys. Like not Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, but the Jedi Council. They're very intimidating, and they're very dogmatic, and they're antagonistic to a certain degree towards Qui-Gon and his aims, and especially because we know that Anakin is Anakin. It's like we want to root for the kid, even though we know he's going to turn into Darth Vader. They treat him in a very callous manner, and I think that's another element of that Phantom Menace title, is that the Jedi, their dogmatism and their failure to see sort of the possibility and the good in something, their immediate hesitancy and fear of the dark side. It's incredible to me, because Yoda says it. He says fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. It's right there. And then what do when they're confronted with the possibility of Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one? They react out of fear. They say, no, we're not training him. It's too dangerous. Yep. Like, wait a second. You just told that kid that fear was the reason why you're not going to train him. Like, what's your deal? What's your deal, Jedi Order? And that's their eventual downfall. So, like, it's right there. It's the beginning of their downfall. Star Wars titles are an incredible thing, and somebody should write a paper.
If they haven't already.
Yeah, if they haven't already. Let's say I'm gonna petition our listeners, because we got about 25 minutes left before we're gonna start to wrap things up. So those of you who are listening, I tweet us at what is it? I always forget our own Twitter. It's ThunderQuackNet.
ThunderQuackNet.
Yeah, ThunderQuackNet. So tweet to us at ThunderQuackNet, and let us know, what do you want to see in Rogue One? What's like, if there's one thing that has to be in the movie, what is it? And I am now going to give Matt and Jason the opportunity to answer that question while our listeners formulate their responses. Who wants to go first? Matt, you go first. You haven't talked in a little bit.
Go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
Let's reiterate the question again. I'm sorry.
If there's one thing that absolutely has to be in Rogue One, like if it's not in Rogue One, you're going to be pissed off.
Oh, well.
What is that one thing?
X-Wings.
X-Wings.
I'm, as much as I can be the old Star Wars fan and complain about, all kinds of things going on, I'm never disappointed at the end of whatever it is at the end of the day. So I will enjoy whatever it is that I see, probably. But I think I would be disappointed if I don't see X-Wings or an X-Wing battle. I'm kind of curious about this other rumored cast member, Ben Mendelsohn, who looks very much like he could either be the Tom Skerritt
Tom
Skerritt character, or even possibly maybe just because of the way his photos look on IMDb, like an Imperial pilot, like an ace Imperial pilot, which, if they have a dogfight scene, would be just spectacular. If there was just like a TIE fighter X-wing dogfight, it would be amazing. So that's what I guess I'll expect to see out of it. I don't expect to see a whole lot of, if any at all, Jedi play. So I think that's all going to be in episode 7. So I think we're gonna just see space battles and whatever the journey of Felicity Jones is. So
yeah, I at the risk of sounding unoriginal and I'm also going to say I'm not going to say X-wings because I've always liked new rebel ships too. So starfighters. I'm just going to say starfighters. We need to have starfighters, and I'm pretty sure I'm safe hedging that one. But I don't have many expectations for this, and I'm trying to not acquire any expectations for this movie. Same for The Force Awakens. I've completely stopped reading spoilers for that, just because I don't want to get too many expectations and ideas of what it's going to be before we actually see it. And I'm just going to go see this. I want to see space battles. I want to see starfighters. And I think X-wings would be cool, but I think seeing a new starfighter as well would be really awesome. But yeah, I don't have many must-haves in this. It has to have space. It has to have stars and wars, and yeah, I think that's about it.
I kind of agree with you there, Jason, and I think just to kind of expand on that, I think when they wiped the expanded universe clean, it left a lot of us, like the hardcore fans, in a position where we were like, okay, well, I guess now we can't go into it with any expectations because they've officially said the slate is clean. Like, so we're just going into with this fresh material, so we can expect anything, like, who knows? And the only reason why we could probably expect to see X-Wings is because we've already seen them in this Episode 7 trailer, but,
right.
Like, for all we know, it's a squadron of something else now. It could be a squadron of A-Wings, it could be Y-Wings, or any other
could have
number
a Q-Wing.
A Q-Wing. It looks like a flying donut.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and even with, like, going back to the prequel movies, of course I was younger at the time, but I always tried to not spoil myself and tried to not, like, go in with too many expectations. And I get for some reason, even if I know spoilers going in, I'm able to, like, completely go blank-minded into a movie, like, especially like the Marvel stuff and stuff like that. So even if I've seen all the movies and know what's kind of leading up and where it's probably going to go, I go in, I sit in the movie theater, and my mind just kind of like goes, okay, we're shutting all that off for now, and I'll bring it up if it's relevant to what's on screen, but I try to not plot out the movie before I see it, because that drives me nuts when I'm right, because that means it's predictable, because when it comes to predicting movies, I'm not very original. So if I can predict it, it's probably not going to be that great. So I don't want to predict this movie. I hope it's completely something that catches me off guard. And as long as we've got starfighters and space battles and stars and wars, I'm good. So
cool. Well, mine is something that I've kind of already talked about tonight, and it actually will feed into a comment that we just got. Mine is absolutely a female protagonist, like the central character being Felicity Jones, and the story centering around her journey. I think that's an important thing that has to happen for the Star Wars galaxy. I think that it's an important thing that has to happen for movies in general. We've talked about it on Quiver a lot. We've talked about it. We talked about it on the last roundtable when I was talking about the Marvel movies that I'm the most excited about. Marvel movie that I'm most excited about is probably Captain Marvel. Like, it's pretty up there because I'm really excited to finally see a character that isn't just another white dude taking center stage, right? And the same goes for DC movies and for Star Wars and for everything. Like, I want to see characters. Here's the thing. We need to get to the point where we're not even having the conversation about female characters being the main characters in genre, so that we can start having a conversation about characters that aren't as easily identifiable. And not to say that they're questionably identifiable, but like that don't fall into one of those two binary settings as protagonists. That's a place where we need to get in filmmaking and in storytelling, and we're not quite there yet because we're still having this trouble with just getting a girl starfighter pilot. Like, just the fact that could be something that we're all like crossing our fingers and hoping happens. The second that they announced Felicity Jones, the first thing that anybody said was, well, is she the main character? I don't know if she's going to be the main character. Like, could she? I don't know. Like, it's a Star Wars movie. It's called Rogue One. Like, is she going to be the main character?
Of course she is.
Yeah, the fact that we question that and say that, like, well, it's going to be about Rogue Squadron. Why would a girl be the main character? Like, that is the fact that there are people out there and that we have to have that argument on the internet. It means that it's still a problem, right? And getting past that is a really important thing, because once we get past that, we can start to move on to the next thing, and have more representation, and have a wider array of characters on screen, which means more stories, which means hopefully better storytelling. I mean, people keep talking about how everything's just recycled. We just keep seeing the same stories over and over and over again. Well, guess what? Guess what would change that right out the gate? Right out the gate. If you put a transgendered gay person as the protagonist in a Star Wars movie, that would be a completely new story, because that's something that we just haven't seen, right? Like, if we just continue putting white dudes as the protagonists of these movies, whether it's Marvel movies, DC movies, or if it's comic books, Star Wars, everything, then we're just going to keep getting the same stories. Because, I mean, I'm a white guy, Matt, you're a white guy, Jason, you're a white guy. We're really boring.
And we
it's
all kind of
Friday night, and what are we doing? We're sitting on the internet talking about a Star Wars movie that all we have so far is a title, a director, and a cast member. That's what we're doing on our Friday night. I guarantee you there are more interesting people than us out there, and they are not just white dudes talking about Star Wars. So, like, come on, like, let's get that. So that goes into Andy's Andy. I'm not even gonna say your last name, Andy, because I don't want to butcher it. Andy B. Yeah, we're just gonna call you Andy B from now on. And he says, I would actually want some LGBT representation in Rogue One, or any Star Wars film for that matter. So Andy and I are on the same page with this, and it's important. It's really important that we do it. I think it's important that genre steps out and does it, because if we look historically, genre television and genre film is where a lot of ground actually gets covered in this stuff, and I don't think it gets enough credit for it. Star Trek, the original series, I've had this conversation with people about Star Trek being hokey, and they don't understand why the original series gets as much sort of praise as it did. And the stories are actually kind of lame, and the special effects are really bad, and blah blah blah. It's like, then you're not really watching Star Trek for the reason why Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek. And when you get into Next Gen, it's even more so, because by the time you get to the 90s, and you start telling those same stories in Next Gen, they go even a little bit further, right? And those were stories about equality and representation, and I mean, to the best that they could do at that time. But like, you just take a look at that bridge. For the time that Star Trek was on television, you had a woman in a command role. I mean, Uhura was the head communications officer on the Enterprise, and you had Sulu driving the ship, right? Like that was a huge step forward, and it's something that if that show were told in a contemporary setting of that time, let's say that it was a naval battleship, it would have just been a bunch of white guys and maybe a black guy in the background, right? Like, it would not have been nearly as interesting as what you get in Star Trek. And then beyond that very face value showing of equality and representation, you go even further when you start to visit alien planets, and you start to unpack some of that stuff about racism and equality and what that really means under the guise of two warring factions of aliens, right? Like, we can sort of hide it in that, and then get people to think about real life and think about how they treat the person across the street, or the people that they work with, right? So if we can do that with Star Wars, which Star Wars has not done to a very good degree, really, at least not in the 6 films that we have. It's definitely done a lot for saying, like, women can kick butt and be important as well, because our 2 central characters in the films, being Padme and Leia, are very strong characters, and can definitely handle themselves. But as we talked about earlier, Matt and I talked about, they're the only girls in the galaxy, apparently, right? Like, nobody else gets to talk. They can stand in the background and look nice, or do something cool, but we can't give them any lines of dialogue. They can't be the head of the Jedi Council. It's got to be what we're used to seeing, right? And hopefully, I really hope that moving forward, that these things are going to change. I was hoping that The Force Awakens would be about, the daughter of Luke Skywalker or the daughter of Han and Leia. We still don't know. That could still be an element of that story, and Rey could turn out to be connected to those characters in some way. But it's become pretty apparent that Rey is not the central character, I think. Unless we get some more info at Star Wars Celebration in a few weeks that drastically changes the way that we're looking at it. I think Matt's right when he says that Finn is probably the main character. He's probably the one that we're focusing on, which is also good, because, I mean, he's not just a white dude. He's only one half of that equation. So that's a step in the right direction. But if it ends up being Poe Dameron as the main character, Oscar Isaacs is the main character, then we're not gaining any ground. We're in the same place that we were with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. So that'll be disappointing. Hopefully Rogue One, because it's a standalone, can break outside of that mold. That should be I think its primary focus, is that it should be the movie that lets people know that the rest of these Star Wars movies are going to be very different. They're going to be their own things, and that they can each kind of have their own flavor and their own style, just like how Iron Man and Thor, they're both in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they have their own distinct flavor. It's their own thing, right? And if you want to watch a Thor movie, you watch Thor. If you want to watch Iron Man, you watch Iron Man. But if you're in the mood for Iron Man, you're not going to go to Thor, right? Because they're very different, and it's different for all of them. Captain America is different from those, and Guardians of the Galaxy is very different from everything else, right? And that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe has flourished because of that. And it's going to continue to do that, and I want to see the same thing happen for Star Wars. I think I can probably, again, speak for everybody on this roundtable when I say that we really want to see an end to what has been the last. How long has it been since episode 1? 14, 50, 16 years.
16
It's
years.
been a long time. Holy smokes! I feel so old when I say that. But I really want to see an end to that era where Star Wars, the second that you say Star Wars, the first thing somebody says is, "Oh, I hate those movies," right? Because in most circles these days, if it's not, the people that I'm talking to right now, most of the time if I bring up Star Wars, the first thing that gets said is how much everybody hates the prequels and how bad the prequels were. And
I just want to take those people and shake them and punch them in the face because they're not
shake
bad.
until they get shaken baby syndrome. Just shake, 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 shake.
Well, zap you with my electricity. And zap
I really want to see an end to that era. Steve Glosson of Geek Out Loud, I'll give him a little plug. Go over to geekouttonline.com, geekoutpodcast.com, mixler.com/Goliverse, and check out all his awesome stuff. He's talked a lot about the dark times for him, which were sort of that era after Return of the Jedi up until basically the special edition, right? Or, I mean, like maybe a little bit before that when the Timothy Zahn stuff started coming out, where there was just nothing. There was no Star Wars. And I would say that our dark times have almost been worse because there's so much Star Wars stuff, but the only people that care are Star Wars fans. And I want to get back to a place where everybody cares, where Star Wars is part of the pop culture consciousness in the same way that Avengers is right now, that Batman is, and that so many of these other things, the Walking Dead, and everybody talked about all this stuff. And Star Wars is kind of this relic of an age gone by, and I really, really hope that JJ and Gareth Edwards and everybody can bring it back up to where it was before, where it's at the top of the pile when it comes to pop culture and genre and all that stuff. So, Matt, the Crankster Cranky, my co-host from the Rebels podcast, tweeted at us, and I would be remiss if I did not mention what he wants. And I mean, even though it is redundant, he says X-Wings. So I think we can all agree that we want to see some X-Wings in Rogue One. And if they're not in there, we're going to be upset. So, let's see. We are at 9:25. So I think it's about time to wrap things up.
Can I just quick sidebar? This is madness. Have you seen the numbers right now?
Yeah, I just posted in the chat a little bit ago about it. I assume you're referring to the Boba Fett Jango Fett battle.
Yes, Jango Fett is beating Boba Fett 79-21, and I could not be happier.
I'm sorry, what? Jango Fett is beating Boba Fett?
79% to 21%.
Not just beating, he is obliterating.
Wow.
I'm hoping that
you need to get in there and vote.
And Obi-Wan is beating Yoda 52% to 48% at the moment. So.
Oh, I gotta get on and tweet and let everybody know. I gotta get my Kenobi and me supporters in there.
But yes,
actually, it's probably everybody that's in this chat right now and watching live. So everybody go vote for Obi-Wan.
And Jango Fett, because Boba Fett's overrated.
Well, is it that thing where people are just trying to the campaigns to get different characters to the top of the brackets,
that might be it,
and not get the typical Darth Vader Yoda to the top, even though if you scroll through the bracket, it's pretty. I mean, R2-D2, Princess Leia, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Chewbacca, Han Solo. There's a Captain Rex in there, but he might go pretty far. He actually might go pretty far.
Do we know who he's
Rex has a good chance?
Do we know who Rex is facing off against? Do we know who won the Padme Jar Jar?
It's not listed, but I think Jar Jar was winning last I saw, which was really funny.
I would
awesome
if that happened. And I think we're pretty safe at betting that Jabba the Hutt beat Bib Fortuna. Pretty sure we're safe to say.
Pretty safe.
The interesting battle is going to be the Darth battle, the Maul versus Vader. I think that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see the same matchup that we saw last year in the semifinals, and it's gonna be Han up against Obi-Wan. Um,
Mm.
if I just based on what I'm seeing here right now, because it's obviously going to be Han. Yoda has an outside chance if people start voting differently, but I don't think that Princess Leia has a chance against.
She's lost 2 years in a row against R2. So she lost 2 years in a row against him, and I'm pretty sure that's the way it was going to go this year. So.
Okay, yeah. So you think it'll be R2 against Obi-Wan?
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, I don't know, man. R2 could beat Obi-Wan. There's a chance there. That's a pretty even fight there.
Yeah.
So it is definitely, but Han Solo is definitely going to the semifinal. Darth Vader's definitely going to the semifinal.
Oh yeah.
Let's see who's the, and then, man, if Django's going to beat Boba Fett, General Grievous maybe in the semifinal.
I thought Tarkin was beating Grievous pretty handily yesterday, so.
Was he? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
What about down there at that
Tarkin.
bottom bracket, that pre-Vizsla Clone Wars?
No, I don't.
I think Jabba's
not going to make it very far because it's just Clone Wars and Rebels characters just don't have the recognition, right? Not everybody watched the Clone Wars. Sad to say, you should all be ashamed of yourself.
You should go watch it. It's on Netflix.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that tangent, now let's wrap things up.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody who's been watching us live. We really appreciate all you guys. Thank you to everybody who supports us over at patreon.com/ThunderQuack, because without you, we wouldn't even be doing these live roundtables. And so far, out of 2 of them, they've both been great conversations. So thank you for that. Hopefully next month, somebody else will lead the charge, and I won't even have to be on it. I can just sit and chat in the YouTube chat. And somebody else can run things, and we can get a few more people that you guys haven't seen yet. Of course, you can check out everything ThunderQuack Podcast Network at thunderquack.com and find all of our new podcasts. And I will once again remind everybody that they need to go to patreon.com/ThunderQuack and get us over that $200 mark. So that we can unlock Talking Time Lords and Jason can start talking Doctor Who with a co-host. How is the hunt for a co-host going?
Well, it's going pretty good. I've still got a couple of applications left to come in, and I'm giving them to the end of the month, basically, to do that. And so, beginning of April, I'm going to start going through. I know I've got 1 or 2 front runners right now, so we'll see what happens. So
cool, exciting. So that's what's going on for us right now. Jason, where else can people find you on the internet if they were so inclined to follow you and stalk you and want to know what you're up to?
Well, if you want to hear me talk more about Star Wars stuff, obviously Wampa's Lair Podcast, facebook.com/Wampa's Lair Podcast, at Wampa's Lair on Twitter, or you can just find us on StarWarsReport.com. Coming soon is Talking Time Lords, and so facebook.com/Talking Time Lords or at Talking Time Lord, because apparently one more character would have broken Twitter. But yes, and we're gonna have a website for that, correct?
Yeah. It'll be TalkingTimeLords.com.
Yes,
it's already. If you go there, it just tells you that it's a park domain because I'm busy. I'm very busy. But it'll be a website eventually. It'll get
there. I mean, we've still got till May. And that's the plan is to launch that in May, and because I need to make sure I graduate. But yes, that's where you can find me.
Don't forget to tell everybody about your YouTube channel. We're on YouTube right now.
Oh yes, that thing, that little thing. YouTube, search for Many Voices of Jason Hunt. I've got it's sort of an irregular, very highly irregular uploading me and my voices, my various vocal talents and impersonations and that sort of stuff. I just uploaded a video of me doing the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. So go check that out. I'm very excited about that.
Cool. Matt, you're not really much of a public figure like the two of us. You don't crave attention in the same way that we do.
I'm a public figure in a very different kind of way. I'm very public in where I am every day. If anyone wants to find me, they can find me usually somewhere around Michael Cohen's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook page. I'm floating around there, but my name, other than Matt Campbell, is usually xmathor X, which is XMATTHOR X. I'm on pretty much everything. Like I said, you can probably find me floating around Mike's pages.
That is true.
And then, but yeah, I'm not no podcast for me and no YouTube channel for me
Yet, because this is something that I'm working on, and I'm going to get you there. I'm going to get you there. It's going to happen.
This is now number 2.
Podcast at some point. So.
This is number 2.
Well, it is.
I'm not going to lie. When you already work for a mouse and you have 2 children, there's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of time.
That's fair.
But I will also be probably tailing around with Mike, probably carrying his bags or something at Star Wars Celebration. So I will be there. Awesome. I'll just be the other guy, white guy with a beard, walking around with the other white guys with beards.
Yep. Yeah.
And to be fair, we also have Kyle. So
yes, Kyle. Kyle Baca,
tall
6
black
foot
guy
8
with a beard. So
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Cool. Well, I guess that means it's my turn to tell you where to find me. ThunderQuack.com, of course, is where you can find all of my podcasts, all of the ones that I do. We're getting ready to launch 8 Bits of Destiny as a podcast, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. That is my plan. I want to get that first episode out soon because we recorded it actually like a little while ago, so I just haven't had the time to do the edit yet. And get that website all set for podcasting. But it's soon. It will be soon. It'll probably be in the next week, I hope. Probably, I hope. I shouldn't start a sentence and end a sentence like that because it doesn't sound like it's actually going to happen. But it is. It is going to happen. Other than podcasts, you can find me at kenobiandme.com is where I really wish that I could update on a weekly basis, but I mentioned the busy thing before, and drawing a Kenobi and Me has just not happened in the last couple weeks. But I do have. I think we might be just about at 40 at the 40 mark for comics over there. So you can check that out at kenobiandme.com. See what my life would be like if Obi-Wan Kenobi hung out with me. What I imagine my life as on a regular basis, hanging out with my best friend Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I'm just going to give a quick plug for society6.com/arkwolf. That's society6.com /arkwolf, ARKWULF. And over there you can, I've got 5 prints up right now for sale. In fact, I have some printouts of them right here, so everybody can see. They're very nice. But the ones that you would get from Society 6 are even nicer than this because this was just printed on my home computer. But you can head over there, check out those, and hopefully buy some of that stuff so that I can support my very expensive video game, role-playing game, comic book, and Blu-ray addictions. I need help with that, and I'm not going to quit. So that means that I need you guys to go buy prints and stuff, and soon, as in probably sometime after we get around to launching Talking Time Lords. there will be ThunderQuack merchandise up on that shop as well. So that will actually be the place to go to get all your ThunderQuack stuff.
I was just going to harass you about bringing shirts to Celebration with you so we can promote for you, but whenever you get around to it, world's busiest man over here.
Yeah. I don't think I have time to get any shirts done, but yeah, it would have been good. It would have been good, but yeah. So those are the places that you can check me out. Arkwolf is my handle on the internet, so you can usually find me that way. Whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, all that sort of stuff, and then you can usually find links to everything else from there. So. That does it for us. It is 9:37. I am exhausted. So thank you guys for being on the roundtable this month, and I'm sure that we'll have you back in the future to talk other topics. I'm sure that Jason will probably want to host a Doctor Who topic at some point, and then I will definitely not be on that one because you don't want to hear what I have to say about Doctor Who.
Why? We always like the opposite end of the spectrum.
Do we? No, maybe not this time. But thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next month, last Friday of April, which will be the Friday after Star Wars Celebration. I have no idea what the topic is going to be yet. If you have an idea for a topic of something you'd like us to talk about on one of these ThunderQuack Patreon roundtables, just tweet it at us. You can also jump over to our Patreon and actually leave comments on things. So. On our wall and that sort of thing, so we can get it from there as well. But just we're on Facebook, and just let us know what you would like us to talk about, and we will be happy to oblige. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, guys.
Adios.